History at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. Triumph des Willens in German is a photographic record of the Nazi Party rally in the city of Nuremberg in September of 1934. The Nuremberg rallies were an annual event from 1923 through 1938. Everything at the rallies was staged and perfectly orchestrated. But the most impressive of all the rallies was the one that was put on film following the purge of the SA in June of 1934 and the subsequent death of the Reichspräsident, General Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, on August 2, 1934. Following von Hindenburg's death, Adolf Hitler, who had been named Chancellor of Germany, which was the head of the government, by Hindenburg in January of 1933, now combined the two offices of President and Chancellor into one combined office, Führer and Reichschancellor, and he became the undisputed master of Germany. In a pre-television age, this film was intended to introduce the ordinary people of Germany, and later the people of the world, to the new German government, the new high officials of state, and particularly to Adolf Hitler himself. It depicts Hitler as he wanted to be depicted, and no film like it was ever made again for the duration of Hitler's empire. It is, in my opinion, many things, but it is certainly an audio-visual assault on the senses, and that is precisely what it was intended to be. And now, Triumph of the Will. It's important to note at the beginning of the film that we will see it listed as the document of the Reich Party Day. It's important because the Nazis wanted people to believe that it was a historical document commissioned by order of Adolf Hitler, the Führer, which we see on the screen now. And so it's looked at as an historical document, not a propaganda film, directed by Leni Riefenstahl. And yet it is a propaganda film very much. And now the sequence of titles in German is referring to the fact that in September of 1934, 20 years after the beginning of World War I, Hitler flew to Germany, to the German city of Nuremberg, to greet the followers of his party for the annual party congress. Here we're talking about 16 years after the defeat of Germany. And most importantly in this sequence, 19 months after the Enabling Act was passed, March 23, 1933, which gave Hitler sole executive power in the state and did away with the power of the parliament. The titles then are leading up to Hitler flying over the city like a messiah, ready to descend upon his faithful followers. And here we have the Junkers plane, which he used in what was referred to as the Hitlerflug, the Hitler flight. He's the first politician in the history of modern political science to use an airplane in political campaigns. So now we see him approaching the city of Nuremberg, and the plane will be descending through the clouds onto the airfield below, where there'll be assembled a group of people to welcome him. But let's not forget the imagery here, the Messiah-like imagery of the great Savior of the state descending from on high to bring a better life to his people below. This is very conscious National Socialist propaganda. While we're waiting for the plane, it's a good point to mention just now that you'll never hear or see the word Nazi in this film. The Nazis don't use the word Nazi. That's a contraction of the German words for the Nazi Party, really a tongue twister. Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Here now we have the old city of Nuremberg, beautiful setting, castle-like structures, wonderful landscaping, the rooftop settings, and the plane is overhead. And if we look below, we'll see that on the streets below, coming up very shortly, will be marching columns of his followers. Now here's the Junkers plane that he used for all of his political campaigns. And here again we have the shadow of the plane cast over the streets below, and you see the massed formations of stormtroopers below. Plane is going to be coming in for a landing shortly. the crowd greedily anticipating his arrival, and already people marching into the city center. The cinematography is really spectacular in this film, of course, because another plane is flying alongside this one taking the pictures. Leni Riefenstahl is a real innovator in the use of the camera and camera angles. Now the plane is getting ready to light. A group of SS men, guards on the field, holding back the crowd. And here's the cheering crowd. Look at those excited faces. Plane is coming up to a stop. Hitler Youth youngsters waving, saluting. The flag pulling up. Anxious people, happy children, all in an agitated state awaiting the arrival of the Fuhrer. And now the ground party moves towards the airplane. The crowd rushes up with a great cheer and the Hitler salute. And Hitler steps out of the plane. Salutes back. He's getting down onto the ground now, and the crowd is closing in, followed by Dr. Goebbels, propaganda minister, and his press chief, Dr. Dietrich. Again, excited crowds, a friendly, smiling face of the Fuhrer. A lot of women in the crowd. He did get lots of fan mail from women. And now the motorcade is coming from the airport along the streets, which are lined with stormtroopers and the population at large, and it's making its way to the Deutscher Hof Hotel in the center of Nuremberg. The photography angles are particularly interesting here because rather than have Hitler photographed from the front, he's photographed from the rear. We see almost an outline of his face at times, and certainly we see the back of his head, the simple uniform that he wore generally, in contrast to many of his lieutenants. And along the way, great crowds of civilians and party members in uniform. He's receiving the salute and giving it back. He's driving in the great grand Mercedes that the company furnished him. And we're passing old imperial symbol flags, as well as the new flags of the National Socialist Movement, which would have the swastika. Here he is in silhouette, almost, dark shadows, coming out from under a viaduct. And once again, making the turn in the car, followed by a motorcade of other top National Socialist officials, cheering crowds, lining both sides of the street. And passing through these very picturesque scenes of old Nuremberg. Bear in mind, Nuremberg was destroyed during World War II, about 95%, and it's been restored to the original plans today. Here passing famous monuments and architecture of the city. And this lovely little girl with a bouquet of flowers, and she's going to give a Hitler salute now. Another smiling child, little blonde, blue-eyed children. And the Fuhrer takes the group of flowers, the bouquet, hands them to an adjutant, salutes, and drives on in his motorcade. Here we have youngsters from the Hitler Youth. You get a good view of the motorcade now, the succession of cars carrying the top officials. And the city is festooned with banners and flags and standards, all bearing the swastika, which is the new official emblem of the state. The word swastika in German is Hakenkreuz, which means hooked cross. It's the shape of the cross in a hooked fashion. Again, other statuary combining old Nuremberg with the new movement. Clock tower as we pass. And again, many flags, and once again, they're the old standards of old Imperial Germany and the new standards of the National Socialist Movement, but not the flag of the Weimar Republic, which was detested very much by Hitler. Here we have the scene of Hitler again, always larger than life, larger than the people in the crowd, deliberate on the part of the cinematographer. Here we have a frontal view of him, passing by his Leibstandarte, the bodyguard, and now he's pulling up to the Deutscher Hof Hotel. Sepp Dietrich, the commander of his bodyguard, getting out to run around and open the door for him. The bodyguard here with the cheering crowd, and Hitler leaving the car, making a momentary greeting to the crowd. Dr. Robert Lai is next to him, the head of the German Labor Front. Hitler is looking over the crowd and paying some attention to the people who've come to wait and see his arrival. There's Heinrich Himmler, And now a very close-up picture of his bodyguard, strong, masculine appearance, linked arms, the black uniforms of the SS, intended both to intimidate and to impress. Hitler now followed by Julius Streicher going into the hotel, another scene of the bodyguard here. Again, heavy concentration on the male imagery of the stormtroopers and the SS. The crowd is cheering, and they'll want to see a view of him after he's entered the hotel. Very excited, particularly women in the crowd. He got about 10,000 letters a week from women, fan mail. There's Martin Bormann opening the windows and Hitler stepping out onto almost what is like a small balcony to acknowledge the greeting of the crowd with the Hitler salute. And they return that with great fervor and energy, and now we fade into a nighttime scene. And during this nighttime scene, we'll have a serenade of Hitler, a band serenade. There's the old Imperial Iron Cross, which has been on a flag and is incorporated into the new national standard. And outside the hotel, in front of it, in a kind of a torchlight ceremony, which the Nazis like very much. They have a lot of nighttime ceremonies. Hitler will be serenaded by a band of the armed forces of the army. And that's coming up now. The stormtroopers are pictured here, the brown shirts holding the crowd back for this event. And the bugle call sounds the beginning of the serenade. In front of the balcony where Hitler will step is a lighted sign that says Heil Hitler, Hail Hitler. And the torchlights, spotlights are on the crowd here. You can see the coffee can style hats of the stormtroopers. And here's the band leader from the army band, which is serenading him. He is chief of state as well as leader of the party, and so of course he's entitled to a band of the armed forces. Again, the torchlight parade accompanies the band. Glockenspiels in the music. Those are those jingling jennies, they call them, and make a lot of noise in a military band. A lot of excitement again, interest. There's the swastika lit atop the hotel. And the serenade continues, and the lights, you can see them lit here now, the Heil Hitler lights prominently displayed just now, with Hitler at the balcony receiving this salute to himself. And that's the arrival of the first night of the events. The Nuremberg Party Day, as it's called, is really not a day, it's a week. Here now we have the bodyguards strongly silhouetted against the smoke and the torches, and somewhat ominous looking. That's intended to be so, but the strong masculine look again is what's projected here by the party. As I was saying, the party day is really a party week. This year the rally runs from September 4th to September 10th. But the festivities are officially referred to as Parteitag, Party Day. And this is the Party Day of victory, and the victory that is referred to as the victory of the National Socialist Party coming to power and ruling Germany. Here once again, swastika banners in front of the hotel window with Hitler present, and the lighted sign that says Heil Hitler, and torches and smoke devices and all sorts of celebratory things. And now we return then to a morning scene, the next morning, overlooking the rooftops, the wonderful, beautiful tiled rooftops of Nuremberg, and a window opens now majestically to allow us to look out at churches and sort of the sleepy city waking up to the events that are coming ahead. Swastika banners everywhere, flying in commemoration of this important week in the calendar of Nuremberg. Nuremberg was officially called the city of the party rallies, and they were held there every year from 1923 on. The last one that would have taken place in 1939 was canceled because it would have been September, and World War II started on September 1st. So the 1939 rally was never held. Many people in Germany hadn't seen these beautiful scenes of Nuremberg, and this film is, of course, intended to be distributed throughout the country, and so the wonderful sights and sounds and scenes of Nuremberg permeate this entire film. There's always the intention with the National Socialists to combine tradition with modernity. They think of themselves as a revolutionary party, but also they draw from the history of the people, or as they express that term in German, the Volk, the folk. Here again, beautiful spires of churches, and now we move to the Hitler Youth camp outside the city. You see the tent city that's set up of the Hitler Youth, and they're going to be getting up, getting ready for their exercises for the day and their participation in events. Now, the Hitler Youth is an overall term which includes 10 to 14-year-old boys who are called the Jungvolk, and 10 to 14-year-old girls who are called the Jungmädchen, and then they go up in age. From 14 to 17, the young girls are called the League of German Girls, and after that, they're called the Group of Faith and Beauty Girls. And the boys, as they get older, go into what's called the Deutsche Jungen, the German youth. Here we have the young boys playing the drums as a morning exercise. And people are now just getting up, and they're going to be shaving and washing and shining their boots and getting ready for the day's activities in a uniform look. They look strong, they look healthy. You'll see them all smiling. They'll have their morning breakfast after they clean up. Here they are washing in the temporary washing areas that were set up in the camp. Sort of like a youth camp that would be set up outside any city in Germany in the summer camp times. But these are youngsters that have been brought in from all parts of Germany specifically to participate in this week of party activities. Here we have them now engaging in some activities, pulling wood to be used in burning pyres, celebratory pyres, also wood for cooking for their sausages and their soups and their sauerkraut and sandwiches. And we'll see the quartermaster corps of the youth group preparing their breakfast. Afterwards, they'll have some sports activities, and then they'll move on to participate in a youth rally for Hitler. Now, the Hitler Youth is a compulsory service in National Socialist Germany, and the intention of it is to indoctrinate children at the time they're very young. Remember, this is a totalitarian state, not an autocratic state. There's a difference. An autocratic state just wants your actions. Totalitarian state wants your thoughts as well. Here we have some morning soup or drink of some kind. It's hard to tell exactly what it is early in the morning. This fellow looks like he's had his share of it. And here they come. Oh, they love it. They're drinking it. Looks good. Here are the German wursts, which go with it. And in general, what's trying to be conveyed here is a feeling of community spirit. The Germans would use the word Volksgemeinschaft, people community. Everybody healthy, well-fed. Look at them eating bread and sandwiches and wursts. This comes right on after the Depression, so they look upon the National Socialist movement as giving them something. Here, very vigorous sports activities, wrestling, boxing, heavy concentration on quasi-military training. Of course, the Hitler Youth wear a distinctive uniform with a diamond-shaped emblem that has the swastika inside. And their motto is blood and honor, Blut und Ehre. And here we have this smiling, blonde, Nordic face of the typical German Hitler Youth boy as he was envisioned by the National Socialist Party. Pretty rough sports, but then, again, the intention here is to prepare youngsters for the arduous duties that they will take on as citizens of this military state, the National Socialist German state. Once again, games and that the children would like playing, and they vie and compete to excel in the various sports games that they play. Here now we have a group of German peasants, farmers, dressed in traditional costumes. This is the fall harvest period, and what they're doing is presenting to Hitler, to the leader, to the head of state, the fruits of their labor. These are contemporary Germans, but they're dressed in traditional costumes. Here we have children as well as parents, and they will be carrying the implements of the farm, and they will actually be bringing the produce of the farm, and Hitler will greet them, symbolically accept their produce. A very stately looking woman here in traditional dress during this parade, and he will greet them and thank them for their efforts, because the farm stock is the foundation of the state, he will tell them. Here's a girl who's enamored of him. You'll see her again in a picture. There she is once again, clearly overwhelmed by being in the presence of the Fuhrer. Here's the large basket of produce that they're bringing him. Little girl in her dirndl eating an apple and smiling and waiting for the appearance of the Fuhrer. There's always anticipation. Here he is now, followed by Dr. Robert Ley of the labor movement. He's going to greet the people who are bringing his harvest. Look how anxious they are and almost very much intimidated in his presence. They curtsy in front of him. This young woman, when he turns back, will show him what she's produced. Here we are again, a very sensual reaction to him, romantic almost. This young woman's going to point down to her harvest and thank him for giving her the opportunity to show it to him. And here they are once again in their traditional costume, showing him the importance of the farm part of the community, and he in turn thanking them for their efforts in making Germany strong. And now he'll return with Dr. Robert Ley to walk past a group of the German Labor Front, the Deutsche Arbeitsfront. These are the young men who were incorporated into a national labor front which supplanted the labor unions. The National Socialists disbanded the labor unions, replaced them with this National Labor Front, organized, uniformed, military in bearing, headed by Dr. Robert Ley, who committed suicide just before he was going on trial at Nuremberg. And Hitler's greeting these young people. Ley is the fellow to Hitler's left, just behind him, short fellow. He had lots of titles, Reich leader and other official titles, but he was also called the Reich drunkard because he was a notorious drunk. When he died and an autopsy was done, they found strange platelets on his brain, which may have accounted for his peculiar behavior. But he was very powerful and very interesting within the state. Here's his young men. Hitler finds one that he's found of interest, and the others look back, and Hitler takes a personal moment to talk to this young boy, which would have remained with that fellow for a long time. So now he's dismissing them. He's going to get into his car, and he's going to depart from this ceremony in central Nuremberg. And we'll see the car drive off, and in the car will be Dr. Ley and the balding head of Julius Streicher, who was the Gauleiter of this part of Germany, the notorious pornographer. We'll have a little bit more to say about him later. Here's some of these farmers and people in the crowd, same people we've seen before, waving him off, and the motorcade travels away. Here are some people like the Deputy Fuhrer, Rudolf Hess, Victor Lutze, the head of the SA. We'll talk about these people more when we have a little more time. Dr. Goebbels, the head of the propaganda ministry. Baldur von Schirach, whose mother was American, incidentally, and who was the Reich youth leader. And this motorcade of cars will now drive off, and the next scene that we'll see is the nighttime opening of the Congress with speeches in the Congress Party Hall in Nuremberg. We see the National Eagle there and the Germany Awaken banners, and Rudolf Hess, who is the Deputy Fuhrer, is now getting up to open the Congress. Rudolf Hess lived to be 87. He flew to Scotland in an abortive attempt to make a deal with the English in 1941. And the result of that was that he was imprisoned in the Tower of London for the entire war, but he was brought on trial after the war because he was indicted for 2 counts of the conspiracy at Nuremberg. 1, to plan and conspire to do a war, and 2, crimes against the peace. He was born in Egypt, incidentally. He was not born in Germany. His father was a businessman, and he was Hitler's secretary during the time when Hitler was writing Mein Kampf in prison in the Landsberg fortress. So he's greeting foreign dignitaries here and members of the armed forces, and he's extolling Hitler and saying that now the armed forces are under the command of Hitler, because Hitler has just recently become chief of state since the death of the Reich president, General von Hindenburg, just in August 2nd of 1934, just a month before this meeting takes place. Hess is making a very powerful speech about how the people are devoted to Hitler, and here are senior dignitaries of the party, is Hermann Goering, who's the chief of the Air Force and later Reichsmarshal. Here's the SA Stormtrooper Chief Lutze, picture of Hitler, being told how important he is to Germany. And Hess is a fairly good speaker and talks about Hitler as being the supreme judge, the supreme conscience of the state, to the wide cheers of the people. And Hess says of Hitler, "You are Germany, and we'll stay with you in good times and in bad times. And when you make a judgment, we'll follow that judgment because it's the collective will of the people." Here's a scene of Hitler, very impressed with the compliments that are being given to him. Much clapping going on. Everyone in this room, as a Nazi Party member, the sign at the back of the room is "Everything is for Germany," "Alles für Deutschland." And here again we have Hitler and Lutze seated next to one another. So Hess concludes his speech, and then we're going to have a succession of people who will be introduced to the German people, making speeches and representing various parts of the government. That's Martin Bormann sitting next to Hitler. Martin Bormann was the secretary to Hitler underneath Rudolf Hess, and then when Hess went to Scotland, Martin Bormann became Hitler's primary secretary. Now, what this crowd is intended to do is to show to the German people the unity of the party under what were very trying times just a few months before. In late June, the stormtroopers were purged and their chief was murdered, Ernst Röhm, because Hitler had made a deal with the big businessmen in the army to purge the stormtroopers of the socialist-thinking people. After all, the big businessmen in the army were all right of center, and they certainly didn't want left-wing people running the state. Now we have a series of people being introduced. This is Adolf Wagner, the governor and Gauleiter of Munich, Upper Bavaria, an old-time friend of Hitler's, one of the few people who called Hitler by his first name. This man was born in 1890 and died a natural death in 1944. He was 54 years of age. Hitler personally attended the funeral. And this man is a fanatic anti-Semite and really an adversary of church and tradition. A cruel, vicious governor and Gauleiter, which is a party governor. But he doesn't live to the end of the war. And he holds many positions, including Bavarian Interior Minister, which is head of the Ministries of Police. And now we have coming Alfred Rosenberg to make a speech. He's the Reichsleiter, or the Reich Director, and later Reich Minister for Eastern Territories. He's a kind of muddled philosopher. He was born in 1893 in Estonia, and he died at the Nuremberg trials. He was executed and charged with crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the common plan of conspiracy. He's followed by Mr. Dietrich. Dr. Dietrich was the Reich Leiter and Reich Press Chief in the Ministry of Propaganda and Enlightenment. He died at age 55. He was sentenced after the war to 7 years for crimes against humanity. He was charged with synchronizing the press and making it truly National Socialist. Here we have Dr. Fritz Todt, an interesting person, comes from a family of builders and developers. He was the General Inspector of Highways until he died in a plane crash in 1942 under mysterious circumstances. Hitler went to the funeral, and he was replaced by Albert Speer, who was always around to be opportunistic when he was needed. This is the man, Dr. Todt, who built the Atlantic Wall and who also built the great superhighways, the Autobahns in Germany. Here we have Minister of State Fritz Reinhardt. He was in the Reich Ministry of Finance. He was sentenced to 4 years after the war for being a member of the stormtroopers and for financial dealings which stole a lot of people's property. He was only given 4 years. In 1949, he was then reclassified as a major war criminal. Here's Dr. Walter Darré, the head of all farmers and agricultural people. He died at age 58. Interestingly enough, he was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, given a 7-year sentence after the war, but released early, died of cirrhosis of the liver. Here we have the worst of them all, Julius Streicher, the Jew baiter, the Gauleiter of Upper Franconia, the editor of Der Stürmer, the horrible pornographic magazine. He was hanged at Nuremberg at age 61 after the war, justifiably so. Dr. Robert Lai, we've seen him before, the head of the German Labor Front. He would have been convicted at Nuremberg, but he strangled himself with a sheet tied to his toilet while he was awaiting trial and the indictment in the cell. Head of the Labor Front, died at age 55. Dr. Hans Frank, a terribly pernicious, evil man, the Reich Minister of Justice and then later the Governor General of Poland. He was charged with 2 crimes at Nuremberg, war crimes and crimes against humanity, sentenced to death and hanged on October 16, 1946. Particularly brutal rule over occupied Poland. His son has recently written a book about him, denouncing him as a terrible father and a horrible person. And it's an interesting book to read, called In the Shadow of the Reich. What we're going to be followed with after Hans Frank is the most gifted speaker in the Third Reich, and that is coming up just now, Dr. Paul Joseph Goebbels, the only Nazi who had a PhD from the University of Heidelberg in history and in literature. He was the head of the Ministry of People, Enlightenment and Propaganda, the Gauleiter of Berlin, later General Plenipotentiary for Total War, went down to defeat with Hitler, and at the last days in the bunker, poisoned his 6 children, and then he and his wife committed suicide and their bodies were burned. He was a true believer, a real fanatic, a very talented speaker, and when Hitler wouldn't come out to speak when they were losing the war, he was always there to the very end saying to them, "Our walls break, but our hearts will never break." Tremendous propagandist and terribly evil man committed to all of the precepts of National Socialism. The next person here that we're looking at is the head of the German Labor Service, Konstantin Hirl. He was sentenced as a major offender after the war to 5 years hard labor. He died in 1955 at age 80. He wasn't certainly the most vicious of the Nazis, but he did direct the whole activity of all young men who had to go into the Reich Labor Service. Those are the peoples that march around with shovels. We'll see a long ceremony from them just following his speech. Here's the symbol of the Reich Labor Service, the Reich Arbeitsdienst. It's wheat shafts and a spade, and these people were formed in paramilitary formations when Germany was limited as to the size of the army it could have. Because by the Versailles Treaty, Germany was limited to a 100,000-man army. Now Hitler's coming to greet these people, and they'll salute him and say, "Hail mein Führer," "Hail my leader," and he'll say, "Hail labor service men." Then we'll hear an interesting demonstration from the men of the labor service. You see it now on the screen as they present their spades. They do them in a military formation as if they were carrying rifles, because their training is very much military, and when Germany does remilitarize, disregard the Treaty of Versailles, and build up a huge army, these young men are ready to go right into the service and trade in those shovels for rifles and machine guns. So now we'll have them recite the fact that they're ready to work with Germany into a new era. And the man in charge, the young man with a very fanatic-looking face, will ask each of them in turn, who represent a unit, where do you come from? And in turn, they'll say they come from Bavaria, from Kaiserstuhl, or from Pomerania, or from Silesia, or from the Black Forest, or from Dresden, or from the Danube, or from the Rhine, or the sea coast. The idea here is to give the impression they're from all over Germany. And at the end, they'll recite the litany, one people, one Reich, one leader. And then we have this face of Hitler looming over all of them, and Deutschland yelled out, Germany. And then the leader again, with a fanatic look in his eyes, talks about how they do their service to the state by working in the swamps, by working in the sea, by building roads, by doing things for the farmers, creating the conditions for a prosperous, strong Germany. And then they'll talk about not being actually in the war, because they're too young to have been in World War I, most of them. But they are saying that they understand that in the new Germany, they will be fighting in the army, and that they are the young manhood of the state. And here you have the looming picture of Hitler always again. Bugles sounded, and now a rendition of the March of the Labor Service, which is a very rousing march intended to instill military passion in the young men who serve in the service. And when they've concluded their march, then the leader again will make a very dramatic statement. He will commemorate the famous battles of World War I. And then he will show great respect for the fallen comrades. Here he is now again, saying that we weren't in the battles in World War I. We didn't suffer under the shell fire, but still we are the young soldiers of the new Germany. And now he will order the followers to commemorate these battles, like Langemarck and Tannenberg, Flanders, the Battle of the Somme. And in the German military tradition, in respect, they lower their flag to the ground. That's a European custom. Americans never do that with our flag. But this is a sign of respect. And then they'll shoot it up back into the air quickly and say, accompanying that quick movement, they'll say, comrades, you who were shot dead by the Red Front and all the reactionaries, you're not really dead. You live on in us. And right now, we'll see that they say it. And here it is, the scene. Comrades, you are not dead. You live today in Germany.
Ihr seid nicht tot. Ihr lebt.
This scene, which is very dramatic, 52,000 men on the field, followed by a close-up of Hitler, will now be followed by Hitler speaking to them. And he makes a long speech to them, and he does what Hitler does typically in his speeches. He always says to an assembled crowd, you're only a small part of what's going on all over Germany. There's a lot more people like you at home, so to say, who haven't come. The millions of people in the country will be watching what you do here today. And when they see what we've accomplished, they will see that we're creating a new Germany that is not divisive. Physical labor is important, and we must always congratulate those people who do physical labor, because it's an important building block of the state. And everybody in the state, every young man will have to pass through your organization before they can become a part of our whole community. And that's what happened, of course. All young men had to go into the labor service. So he's praising them. He's telling them that they're part of a mass movement. He's saying that they represent the vanguard of what everybody will be doing in Germany, trained to serve the state. And as he speaks, behind him is the head of the organization, Konstantin Hierro.
Wie ihr in stolzer Ergebenheit diesem Deutschland.
Hitler's close-up scenes are very dramatic in this film. Here he is here. He tends to repeat himself a lot, but it's how he delivers that's important, not always what he says. And here again we have the marching columns, and you can see that, except for the fact that they're carrying shovels instead of rifles, they look like soldiers. And they will become soldiers, and very good ones, during the course of World War II, because they've been trained for so many years in discipline and military science. When this scene is concluded, we'll fade into a nighttime scene, which is a rally being held for the stormtroopers, the Sturmabteilungen. Those are the brown shirts. Those are the people that eventually came to number about 2.5 million. Hitler's private army. Here's their chief, Victor Lutze. He supplanted Ernst Röhm, who was murdered in October of 1934, and Victor Lutze became the head of the stormtroopers, and he served in that capacity until he was killed in an automobile accident in 1943. So he really didn't live to see the end of the war. This, once again, is a nighttime rally. Torchlight rallies are very important. We'll have a little bit more to say about this kind of rally. It really has to do with the cult of death, which the Nazis practice and revere. After all, heroes that are dead cannot be contradicted in anything that they said or thought. So the cult of the dead is very important to the Nazis. And he's making an introductory speech trying to win over the stormtroopers and say, well, the purges are over. Don't worry anymore. I'm here. I was a stormtrooper in the early days, and I'm with you now. I'm just the chief now. And Ernst Röhm, the more charismatic leader who was killed by Hitler, is never mentioned in this film. But his presence is felt, because it's very important that these stormtroopers remain loyal to the movement, and that's why they're so prominent in the film. And Victor Lutze, who is much less of a person than Ernst Röhm. Ernst Röhm was a former cavalry captain. He looked good on horseback. He was tough looking. He had a saber scar across his face, a deep voice. This man has a loud, squeaky voice, and really isn't much of a person, and they were probably all relieved when he died in an automobile accident in '43. But nonetheless, at this nighttime rally, his function is to show the unity of the stormtroopers and their continuing loyalty to Hitler. So that's the purpose of the nighttime rally. Now, this nighttime rally will, of course, come to a conclusion after the teeming crowds try to reach the chief of staff. He's called in German Stabschef, chief of staff of the stormtroopers. They're generally referred to by their initials, the SA. In German, it would be pronounced SA, and it stands for the word Sturmabteilung, which means storm detachments. Everything about the National Socialist Party has a note of violence in it: assault, storm, all those kinds of things. Now we have a great display of fireworks, which is the culmination of this rally, and the stormtroopers will salute their leader once again and march off with their parade torches after lighting almost the requisite bonfire. There's almost a bonfire in anything that goes on at night in National Socialist rallies, pinwheels and all sorts of firecrackers and aerial displays, which Leni Riefenstahl is very fond of photographing and does very good work with them. This is not easy to photograph and remember. As we speak in the year 2000, this film is 66 years old. So it's technology that is, by today's standards, isn't up to what we would consider modern. But this film was made in 1934. Now, the scene fades into a bugle of the Hitler Youth at a stadium where they're holding their reception for Hitler, and here are the little young drummers with intense looks on their faces, awaiting the arrival of the Fuhrer. These are the youngest ones, from 10 to 14, and you'll see older ones here as well. And they always push the little blondes up to the front. You'll see that. It's characteristic. An interesting comment, of course, because Hitler isn't blonde and blue-eyed, nor is almost anybody else in the hierarchy. He isn't even a German. He's born in Austria, so he's a foreigner. The single lightning bolt, or runic symbol, is the symbol of the Hitler Youth. The double one is the SS. Now, entering the stadium will be Hitler, followed by Martin Bormann, his secretary, his SS adjutant, Schaub, his SA adjutant, his stormtrooper adjutant, Bruckner, and of course he'll come in with Rudolf Hess. And behind him right here in the scene is Baldur von Schirach, the head of the youth movement, who was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment at Nuremberg and repented all of the mistakes that he had made by becoming a member of the movement. He was, this is Dr. Goebbels, you see coming in, the propaganda minister, and there Hitler on the podium with Baldur von Schirach behind him. Baldur von Schirach was a kind of a romantic dreamer. Here's Hitler with his whole entourage, Bormann, Goebbels, Hitler, and his adjutants. Baldur von Schirach was a romantic dreamer. There's Rudolf Hess with Hitler. Schirach wasn't a typical Nazi. He was one of these wandering bird, Wandervögeln, romantic young men who took over a youth movement and found Hitler captivating and was a devoted follower of Hitler. And then he was later transferred from youth leader to the Governor General of Vienna, and there were some war crimes charges levied against him, but he really was not a person that had serious penalty levied against him. He was only given 20 years imprisonment. So he was released in 1966 and didn't live too much longer after that. Now, the youngsters in this scene will be singing the Hitler Youth March, the Jugendmarschiert it's called, and it has phrases in it which almost make Hitler a god. Hail Hitler to thee, very much religious motifs. And in fact, after Baldur von Schirach speaks, and he's going to be speaking now, addressing these youngsters as his comrades, he's going to be saying to them how happy it is again for us to be here experiencing the presence of our leader because he embodies so much that we find important. He has, by his example, set up a state which has no class and no caste distinctions. Of course, the reference he's making here is to the old Imperial Germany. There's the chief of the army, General von Blomberg, very interested in young men because he wants them for the army. But to go on with Schirach's speech, he talks about Hitler as being selfless, as being dedicated, as being faithful, as being courageous, and all of those things. And now he'll introduce Hitler, who always makes a very dramatic speech to youngsters, and he's no exception here. And he'll tell them that he wants them to absorb everything important that the National Socialists stand for. And he's very repetitive in his speaking. He talks about Germany, he talks about blood, he talks about one Reich, and he tells the youngsters that they have to be peace-loving, but at the same time courageous. And they are people who must never allow class distinctions ever again to enter into German society. He also says to them the same things he said to the labor boys. You are representing just a small part of what's going on all over Germany. And you represent the new Germany, peace-loving but strong, not soft, hard like steel. people who will never collapse, never give up. And then he says things which almost come out of the Roman Catholic ideology from his background. He says of them, "You must become flesh of our flesh and blood of our blood." That's almost out of the consecration ceremony of the Roman Catholic Church. It's bizarre, but remember, Hitler was raised as a Catholic in Austria, and he was very well acquainted with all the rituals of the Catholic Church and perverted some rituals to his own use, the flags, the youth groups, and all those things, which of course had no relationship to National Socialism, but he was familiar with how youth groups could be manipulated. And he says in this speech, "You must carry the flag with you that we tore from nothing, because one day we'll all wither away, but you'll be here and you'll carry on." And this is the totalitarian notion that the ideology goes on even after the man. In his case, happily for the world, it didn't, because it really is a one-person philosophy. There is no National Socialism without this man that you're looking at. He's inseparable from it. When the speech is over, there'll be a lot of cheering and saluting, and he will say to them that Germany expects them to follow in the footsteps of the party, and that the party represents a movement that's going all through Germany, and nothing can stop it. And as the party moves to become wedded with the German people entirely, the German youth will pick up the banners, and across all of the state, they will follow Hitler, and Germany will follow them. And once again, references to loyalty to the flag and to the state, and particularly to him, because remember, the youth is named for him. It's the Hitler Youth. And remember also that in National Socialist Germany, the army takes a personal oath of allegiance to Hitler. Never had it done that before. It had always taken an oath of allegiance to the state. But under Hitler, everyone is sworn to obey him. So this wonderful ceremony of the Hitler Youth will now come to a conclusion, and Hitler will then depart from the stadium, and the action will move towards the one small segment of the movie which has the armed forces in it. Now bear in mind, because you're looking at a film where everyone wears a uniform, none of these people are part of the armed forces. They're all various organizations of the party. Hitler believes in the military identification and character of his political party. So every unit of the party, boys, girls, all the various organizations, wear uniforms. And that's something that's difficult in democratic societies to understand, because we naturally look at a scene like this and think that those are all military. Well, there's no military in this scene. Here's the young boys again, the young drummers. And the group scene, there's one officer in the back with a military salute, but the rest of the people there are party members. And now the youngsters will give him a send-off. Even though there were young girls there in this stadium, they're not prominently displayed in this scene, because this is a scene that talks of harsh discipline and steel courage and more military kinds of themes, and they just don't show the girls when they talk about those themes. Here they're leaving the stadium to the rousing cheers of the youth, and there are a few older people in the crowd that are their superiors, but for the most part, you're looking at youngsters from 10 up into manhood to about 21. But the majority of them will be 10 to 17 in these groups in this stadium. And when he leaves here, we'll then see a scene that shows Air Marshal Goering, Minister of War General von Blomberg, and Hitler reviewing of all things, a cavalry unit that did exist in World War II. And General von Blomberg lived to be about 68. He died in U.S. custody in 1946. He was fired by Hitler in 1938 because he married a prostitute. He didn't really know that she was. He was a widower, and that caused a lot of embarrassment. So the army forced him out because Goering wanted him out anyway. Here they are, all three of them, Goering, Hitler, and General von Blomberg. And they're going to be reviewing the 18th Cavalry Regiment of the Army, which is displaying its maneuvers, and they'll be followed by modern armored cars and gun caissons being pulled by horses as well. The armed forces are still at this time called the Reichswehr, which is really armed forces of the state. And a year later, their name is changed to Wehrmacht, which is the name we know them under. Wehrmacht is a combined military force of three branches, Army, Navy, and Air Force. But at this time, it has the old name, and they wanted to be in the film. The party really didn't want them in the film, so they got about 4 minutes. And the result is they complained so much that next year they got their own film, one called Day of Freedom, Tag der Freiheit, and it's about 18 minutes long. But it was never as good as this film about the party. So the Army's feelings were hurt, but they really didn't quite understand that the notion of the party rallies annually in Nuremberg were a celebration of the political party, not of the armed forces. Now we're going to go to a night rally, and there's someone that's not in the film, but he's responsible for this rally. And that's Albert Speer, Hitler's architect. Albert Speer, you may remember my saying a few minutes ago, replaced Dr. Fritz Todt as Minister of Armaments and General Construction. But earlier on, he was Hitler's architect, and he designed not only the sets for this, but conceived of the idea of what we're seeing now, a sea of flags. That was his idea. Massed formations of flags. He called them a sea of flags. And then he decided, instead of building all buildings, he would build something like a cathedral of lights. He would use spotlights going up from the ground into the sky to create the symbolism of height. And he called it a cathedral of lights because if you look up the stream of light, it gives height and substance and background to the ceremony that's going on. This is in an area which they call Zeppelin Field. And there you see the large eagle which Speer designed, which is a backdrop to this ceremony, and people carrying all the standards. Now, the idea of all these flags and standards is copied a little bit from Mussolini, whom Hitler admired. And Mussolini, remember, has been in power already for 12 years when this film is made. And Mussolini, in turn, copied his flags and banners from the old Roman Empire. So there's a lot of connection between the dictators. Here we have this backlit scene of Hitler. And while the flags always have to be lit, frequently the crowds are not lit as well. That's by design. But Hitler's always silhouetted well. He can always be seen. He's the figure that stands out amongst all of the little people. If you think of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis, nobody counts for anything but the leader. And in this film here, really everyone is diminished in size except Hitler. He's always a larger-than-life figure. He's always speaking on top of a large podium. And here he's saying, again, 200,000 people have assembled here, but this is the first time we meet when we're in power. And we come here, and not because anybody ordered us to come here. We come here because our hearts bring us here. Our hearts which combine us with the party and with the state. And people that don't understand our political movement can't understand our fanaticism. Sometimes he uses the word fanaticism. He doesn't consider it a negative. It's very positive. It means commitment to him.
Es war die große Not unseres Volkes, die uns einst ergriffen hat.
This nighttime rally is really a pump up the followers kind of speech. The people in the audience come from all the various formations of the party, the political, the educational, the professional, and they're the high leaders of the party from all of the various formations. Don't forget, the party mirror images the state. If there's a National Socialist Medical Doctors Organization, well, then there's the German Medical Doctors Association. And the lawyers have a group that are professionals. Well, the party has its group, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the leaders of all of the organizations of the National Socialists are here at this nighttime rally. And he's really trying to stir up patriotism and following and commitment to the party. And that's the purpose of this nighttime rally. And he uses these kinds of rallies because he's silhouetted. Of course, on film, we see his head here prominently featured by Leni Riefenstahl. And then we see the fadeaway to the crowd. And once again, you have a re-emphasis on the Führer principle. In German, the word is Führerprinzip, means Führer principle. And what that means really is that everybody is subordinated to the will of the Führer. There are no other political parties since this date, 1934, in Germany. Political parties have been outlawed, except for the National Socialist Party. And they do that openly because their theory is that political parties are divisive. And the Führer speaks for all of the people, and therefore there's no need for a political party. But every once in a while, he has to breathe life into the movement and get their support again. And he likes to do that in these kinds of nighttime rallies. This is coming home for the National Socialists. Everybody's a comrade here. And as he says in the film, drum will join drum, banner will join banner, group will join group, Gau will join Gau. We'll all march forward in a great brown column in a unified nation. He's good at this. If you listen to his words in German, a lot of the words are repetitive, but they're very dramatic, and they're punctuated with great force. Hitler's a good speaker, even though people who study the German language are quick to point out that he speaks with Austrian German pronunciations. He is, after all, an Austrian, and Austrians pronounce German differently than Germans do who speak what we call Hochdeutsch, High German, Standard German, like BBC English. So Hitler's German is not always the kind of German that one might expect of a cultivated political figure, but then that's not his purpose. Remember, he's not a highly educated person. Hitler went to the equivalent of high school, maybe a little bit of junior college, but he did not get into the art academy, and he did not get a university degree. Instead, he threw in his lot in World War I in the German army. In fact, he left Austria, where he should have stayed to volunteer as a citizen, and left Austria, went into Germany, and signed up in a German regiment, and served the entire war. And that was the beginning of his feeling of comradeship with other people. He found his home in the war. Now, here in the speech, he's saying that God ordained this movement. This movement was not created by any earthly power. This movement was destined by God's wishes, and he's carrying them out. And he's constantly making oaths and vows that every day, every hour of every day, he will devote his entire life to work for and to think only of Germany. And he's asking them to do the same thing. One Reich, that means empire, one people, and hail the victory of those people. That's what the word Sieg Heil mean in the German language, hail victory. So this nighttime rally is very important. It's characteristic of German rallies during the National Socialist period. They made great use of torchlight parades. And when this happens, after this meeting comes to a close, then we're going to have a daytime commemoration of fallen people. Here you see the stormtroopers marching with their torches, ending this meeting. But following it, we're going to have a daytime commemorative ceremony to the dead members of the party who fought for the party during the period of time that the National Socialists refer to as the Kampfzeit. Kampfzeit. That compound word in German means time of fighting. And that refers to the period 1923 to 1933 when they were not in power and when they had daily street fights with the communists in all the major cities. And it was a real question as to who would win, the communists or the National Socialists. And when you see their election posters, they're really strange by our standards. I mean, how would you like to see an American election poster where the picture showed a member of a party picking up a chair and crashing it over someone's head? That were the Nazi party posters. Now here we have the open daytime arena to commemorate the dead members of the party and to commemorate the death of the recently deceased President von Hindenburg, who died in 1934, just a month before this meeting, and who was the Reich president from 1925 on. And Hindenburg's a real icon of National Socialism. He was born in 1847. He fought in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. He fought in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. He was the great hero in World War I of the Battle of Tannenberg in 1914 against the Russians, where a million Russians are lost in 4 days of fighting. And here there's going to be a military salute to him. It's convenient for Hitler, of course, because he likes to pull on the reputation of the deceased Reich president. Hindenburg didn't like Hitler at all. He called him that little bohemian corporal. But here we have, coming up the steps of the commemorative area, Himmler on the screen's left and Hitler in the center, and Victor Lutze on the right. Now, Heinrich Himmler is the chief of the secret police, the Gestapo. He's the head of all of the SS. He was born in 1900. He died in 1945 on May 23rd in British captivity. He was hiding out, trying to escape the Allies who had an order for his arrest. They found him. They didn't realize who he was at first. When they discovered who he was, he shifted his jaw and he had a poison capsule strapped to one tooth and died almost instantaneously. So he escaped what would have been the certain death sentence of the Nuremberg trial, because Heinrich Himmler is one of the most sinister figures of the entire National Socialist movement. And yet he was the son of a pious Roman Catholic schoolmaster who was at one time tutor to royal members of the royal family of Bavaria. So he came from a good family. And yes, indeed, he was a chicken farmer at one point, as a lot of people said. And like most of Hitler's followers, he was in the army during World War I. Here are the members of the National Socialist Motorized Corps, and this is a ceremony heralding an oath of fealty to Hitler. When you look at him, this looks like a medieval ceremony, like a knight standing on top of a block and all his followers coming to show him fealty and submission. And it's a very impressive scene with strong martial music playing, and Hitler standing on top of a solid stone block with the flags in the background. And actually you can see Leni Riefenstahl's camera carriage going up and down the column on one of those flags. We'll try to point it out again. Here's Himmler in his black SS uniform on one side of Hitler. Hitler looking down on his followers carrying the standards. Every one of those standards has a city or county name on it, but it also has the German words Deutschland erwache, Germany awaken, which is a rallying cry of the National Socialist Party. And you see once again how everybody is reduced in size and Hitler is increased in size. When you have so many people, they almost meld into nothing. Here we have the stormtroopers in the brown. That would be the SA, the Sturmabteilung. That's the larger of his private armies. And then the smaller one will be the people dressed in black, who also wear brown shirts though, but the people dressed in black who are the SS men. And this is that sea of flags, and what each of them is doing as a unit is walking up to Hitler, pledging their loyalty, and there's a purpose for this. They have just come off of this terrible Night of the Long Knives, June 30th, 1934, when Hitler purged the SA, the stormtroopers, with the cooperation of the army and the industrialists, purged the stormtroopers of their chief, Ernst Röhm, and all their high leadership, because the army felt that Ernst Röhm and the stormtroopers wanted to take over the regular army. In fact, they said things like, let's make it a brown army. Let's make it a people's army. Well, that sounded too left-wing to those old aristocratic German officers. It scared the bankers. It scared the church people. You'd be surprised to see later in the film we have a bishop, a Reich bishop. Now again, the sea of flags and people marching right up to Hitler, pledging their loyalty even though their leader has recently been killed. And it's important for him to make a convincing speech to them. And that's what he's going to do. You see in the film different units of the stormtroops. The ones that have those leather crash helmets are the motorized corps. Here we have tradition. See these flags? Those are imperial flags. There's Victor Lutze standing next to Hitler. There's Rudolf Hess with the cap on, the regular military-style cap. Here's the band of the SS, dressed in black. Now, the special unit of the SS that guards Hitler is called the SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. Leibstandarte really just means bodyguard. And those are under the direct control of Himmler. And as National Socialism continues, Himmler, who's pictured here, becomes the primary police functionary in the whole state. And the stormtroopers, the SA, the brown shirts, are secondary. There's the great column again, and Leni Riefenstahl is taking films from a camera set up in that carriage that moves up and down. Here's the stone block, and Victor Lutze now, the head of the stormtroops, is going to make a renewed commitment to Hitler, saying to Hitler in public, just as we always followed your orders in the past, my leader, you can count on us to carry out those orders in the present. And then he turns to his stormtroopers who need this reassurance, and he says to them, we will follow only the orders of our Fuhrer. We always have, we always will. He stands by us, and we stand by him. This was important. It was important for the German public at large to see that there was no division in the party. Now, Victor Lutze initiates a series of salutes to Hitler, and then Hitler makes the all-important speech of addressing both the SS and SA men. And this speech is extremely important because he goes into the Rome purge, the purge of the SA, without mentioning the name of the people, of the principal man and the followers he purged. He just says a shadow cast itself over the movement. But really, I need to reassure you, my SA had nothing to do with the shadow. It was a subversive, small element within the party, and no other group in the party had anything to do with it. And those enemies that we have inside the party, maybe a few, and outside the party, if they think it divided the party, they're fooling themselves. Because this little insurrection in our party didn't do anything but strengthen it. And we're as strong as this rock that I'm standing on, and nobody's going to divide us in all of the country. And I want you to know that, and I want you to know as I stand here that if anyone tries to do you harm, you, my stormtroopers, they'll bring harm only unto themselves. You have to know that. It was important for him to emphasize that, because certainly there were people in that group who wondered, will he purge us again? After all, we read the Russian papers, Stalin's always purging people. What's Hitler going to do? But he doesn't. That's not his style. He cleaned up the movement, he satisfied the bankers in the army and his industrial backers, and he then went on to be loyal to his own stormtroopers. Hitler has a kind of perverse loyalty to his followers, even when they have extreme shortcomings. The only reason he got rid of Rome was threatening the movement entirely. So he goes on to say, as he's talking to them, only a fool would break up somebody as strong as this organization that I founded. So he closes his remarks with encouraging them to stand together with him for Germany, and telling them that he's now going to present them with new colors, with new flags, and say to them, I'm giving them to you because I know you're the most loyal people in the country. Now this brings up the Blutfahne. That word is a German word which means blood flag. When Hitler tried to overthrow the state in 1923, many years earlier, in Munich, he marched against the government with a group of followers, and they carried a flag, and they were shot down by the police and the army, and their blood fell on this flag. And the flag became a sacred symbol for the movement. And it was referred to always as the blood flag, the Blutfahne. And a special fellow carried it One person always carried it. His name was SS Standartenführer Jakob Grimmiger. He's the guy who carried it in 1923. And that flag became like a religious relic. And each year, when the party rally met and Hitler gave out new flags to the different regiments, he would touch each new flag to the old flag with the bloodstains on it, carried by that same man. Here he is shown right here, Jakob Grimminger behind Hitler in the black uniform. And you see what Hitler's doing. He's grabbing a new flag, touching it to the old flag. Very solemn look on his face. This is a quasi-religious activity of his. He took it very seriously. They all took it very seriously. And here we have a formation of the military saluting the new flags of the party. So nobody knows what happened to this flag. The die-hard Nazis think it was buried somewhere and it'll come out someday when the movement is revived. But it was always revered, kept in a special case in Munich in party headquarters. And whenever it was taken out, it was carried by that one man. That's the only thing that one man did. After the war, he became a city councilor in Munich, and he died at the age of 77 in 1969. So that's the story on the blood flag, and blood relationships are very important in National Socialism because the political movement is built on race and blood and ethnicity, in contrast to other movements like the Soviet one. So here we have then the conclusion of this ceremony of the flag, the new flags being given to both SA and SS units. Now, following this ceremony, we're going to see the concluding huge parade in the center of Munich, which takes place in front of the big cathedral, the Church of Our Lady. It's called the Frauenkirche, the Roman Catholic church. There's a big plaza in front of it, which has been renamed Adolf Hitler Platz. And we're going to see Hitler driving in his motorcade. Actually, it'll be just his car. And he'll pull up in a prominent place after we pass through these banners and flags that are adorning the buildings. Here he comes now. And he's leaving those fields that he was in outside the city, and he's coming into the center of the city now for the grand parade, which will be just before the finale, the closing of the Congress on the 10th of September. The whole Congress went from 4 to 10 of September in 1934, and these various events we've looked at, nighttime and daytime, have occurred during those days. So now the crowds are assembled in the middle of Nuremberg, festooned flags and wreaths and banners and floral arrangements everywhere, people hanging out of every window. Looks a lot like a New York City ticker tape parade. It's very elaborately staged. Everybody knows his place. And Hitler's car now is making a big circle, and it's going to turn and position itself. Here it comes, the great 777 Mercedes. I think it was the 770, the Grosse Mercedes. It was made especially for him. And here we have then Hitler getting ready. The guards are at attention. The band has given a welcome. This is a stormtrooper band. And we have the beginning of the march past. Hitler could take a parade for hours and never get tired. The march past of all units. The first is the march past of the stormtroopers with Victor Lutze in charge, and then Victor Lutze will come and stand next to Hitler. And here is the SS parade guard marching by. Here's a group of Gauleiters and various people we've seen in the film. Now Victor Lutze is shaking hands with Hitler. He's the stormtroop chief, and he's going to stand next to Hitler while the various units of the SA march past. There'll be honor guard units. Here's Julius Streicher saluting them. These are special guards units of the SA. Some of them are from the oldest units in the stormtroopers, and this parade will go on for quite a long time. This is called the Parade of the Storm Flags. Hitler saluting again with Victor Lutze there, and we'll see coming up various dignitaries in the crowd. We'll see eventually Grand Admiral Raeder, there he is in the front. He was sentenced right here at Nuremberg to 3 counts: conspiracy to commit war crimes. Finally, only got 9 years. Here's Lutze again, and more units of the stormtroopers marching by. There's Hermann Goering. He's wearing an SA uniform there, even though he's an air marshal. There's Rudolf Hess, the deputy Fuhrer, with the military-type cap. And we're going to be seeing a group of Gauleiters there, and in a minute or two, military officers saluting with the military salute. And we will have coming up the head of all the presses of the National Socialist Party, Max Amann. He was sentenced to 10 years at Nuremberg because he was considered a major offender for all of the literature that he put out. And he finally died at age 66. He hasn't come up onto the screen yet, but we'll see him in a moment or two. Here's a group of people looking out their window with binoculars at the massed formations that are marching below them. And here's Hitler again, ready to stand out for hours. These parades could take as long as 4 hours, and of course he had nowhere to go. He was there. The troops marching by. Bear in mind, then again, as we watch these parades, these are not formations of the army or any of the armed forces. These are military-like formations of the party, of the National Socialist Party. The National Socialist Party is a militarized party. Everybody wears some kind of uniforms. There's Max Amann. And here's Walter Buch. We just saw him for a moment, but he should have been executed at Nuremberg. He's one of the worst offenders, the chief judge and anti-Semite who finally was going to be brought to justice after the war and then drowned himself after cutting his wrists. Here's Dr. Lai. We've seen him. That was Gauleiter Wagner, and now Hitler again in a close-up. And we'll be seeing others of the people that we've already been introduced to in the film. Dr. Robert Lai will come up. Here's Ritter van Epp. He was the Governor General of Bavaria. These people with the short pants are people from Austria, SA units marching by from Austria. Here's again the head of the stormtroopers with the leader of that Austrian group. And now we have people that look like military formation, but once again they're not. They're the Air Defense League of the party, called the Reich Luftschutzbund, and they're marching by in Air Force-like uniforms. But now we have a group of leaders, the leader of that group saluting Hitler, and then he'll stand by and take the salute of the rest of the people. So the formations that are walking by are all the different military units of the party, but not of the state. And that's always well to bear in mind, because the armed forces of the state always were aware of the fact that they had a shadow existence side by side with them of armed units of the party. Now, of course, when Hitler became chief of state, they all blended together. These are units of what they call the Old Guard, the Feldherrnhalle Regiment of the Stormtroopers, the oldest members of the Stormtroopers. Again, wearing uniforms that look like they would be soldiers, but they're not. And they march in the German parade step, which is the goose step. However, we'll see a better demonstration of that a little bit later when Hitler's own guard does them. But again, now remember that people all over Germany will be seeing this film. It ran for about 10 years straight. It was premiered a year after it was made. 1935 it was premiered in Berlin, and then it went for about 10 years almost to the end of the Reich. Now we're going to see a group marching that are those fellows wearing the leather motorcycle helmets I pointed out to you before. They're the Nationalsozialistische Kraftkorps, the National Socialist Transportation Corps. And they do all the kinds of things you might think transportation people do: drive trucks, drive motorcycles. Of course, here they're marching without their motorcycles. It's important that every group of the party had a distinctive uniform. Each one of them had a distinctive dagger. Last time I think I counted, there were as many as 65 different ceremonial daggers that the National Socialists have. There's the Church of Our Lady, a strange confluence of events there, Hitler in front of the Roman Catholic Church. Again, a aerial shot, a good cinematography by Leni Riefenstahl. I mean, spectacular. This has to go down in history as probably the supreme propaganda film. And were it even not propaganda, just from a cinematography point of view, it's spectacular. And remember again that as we speak, this film is 66 years old. You're looking at a new release of it, digitally mastered, but the original film was done in 1934. Very good use of black and white techniques. Color film was available, not as common in 34 as it would have been, say, in 38 or 39, but Hitler preferred black and white film, and Leni Riefenstahl did as well. And you can see these scenes of the city, which are just quite picturesque, of the little bridges going over Nuremberg, and the clustering of people. There's that feeling of NSDAP, as you see on the flags. That stands for the initials of the party, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. If you listen to the name of that party, it's got something for everybody in it. It's nationalist, but it's socialist. It's a workers' party. And so it's right and it's left and it's center. Of course, it's really, truthfully, none of those things. It's just a vehicle for Hitler to control the state. Here again, we're looking down on Adolf Hitler Platz, where the parade is taking place, in front of the Church of Our Lady, and we're looking at these wonderfully picturesque rooftops of old Nuremberg. All of this, as I think I said before, destroyed by aerial bombardment in World War II, but every bit of it rebuilt according to the same plans from the 18th century after World War II. So if you go to Nuremberg today, except for a few bullet holes in some of the old buildings, it's pretty much the same as it was, as you see it here. Now, this is a German movie made for Germans, and we do have that old cliche about the Germans and militarism and so on. Well, there is a certain sense of orderliness and Germanic pride in the military since the time of Frederick the Great. Would this have gone over in an American audience? Who knows? It's hard to say. We really didn't get much of an opportunity to look at it because their marketing of it wasn't very successful, or they didn't attempt it as they should have. If they had marketed it in 1934, they might have intimidated a lot more countries with it, because it does have a scary part to it. It shows a unified state, it shows a highly militarized state, and it purports at least to show a people 100% committed to their Fuhrer. Here's a nice shot of the Frauenkirche again. Frauenkirche simply means Church of Our Lady. And so you have a blend here of medieval Nuremberg, in other words, traditional German society. Can't get any more traditional than being in front of the main Catholic Church in a town, and the modern National Socialist state. So now here's our shovel friends again. These are the people from the Reich Arbeitsdienst, the Reich labor service, and we saw them, and here's military officers giving the Germans, not the German salute, but the military salute. That's the one where the hand goes up to the hat rather than straight ahead like a fascist salute. Here's our people of the labor service carrying their shovels, and Hitler again seen from, he's on high, we're below him, everybody's below Hitler, he's always above. It's again that cult of Hitler, which was actively promoted by him and by Dr. Goebbels, and of course Leni Riefenstahl gave it form in this film, and certainly helped to contribute to the Hitler cult. There's Dr. Goebbels next to Max Amann, the Reich publishing czar, and Hitler again, and more men of the labor unit, whose insignia, remember, on the flags you can see is the shovel and the shafts of wheat. These are all young men who will do public service, road work, buildings, public construction. Hitler again from on high. Hitler wears the Wound Cross that he earned and the Iron Cross First Class. He really doesn't wear many medals in contrast to everybody else, and his uniform is rather plain. You see, it's a sort of a modified military uniform. And in fact, he doesn't wear a brown shirt when he's dressed up. He wears a white shirt. Most other people in the party wear brown shirts. So he sets himself apart a little bit in the same way that Napoleon dressed as a corporal, while all of his field marshals wore fancy marshal's uniforms. And people wondered why. Well, Napoleon wanted to set himself apart. It wasn't because he couldn't afford a marshal's uniform. And the same thing with Hitler. Hitler wanted always to be thought of as a man of the people. He didn't marry. He was consecrating his life to the fatherland. So far as they knew, of course, he had a mistress. And the mistress was a shop girl who worked in his photographer's shop. Heinrich Hoffmann was his photographer. And Eva Braun, the mistress, who was never seen in public, worked in the shop. And then he put her up in his country house in Germany. Here we have a distant scene of all the people in front. And now we have the beginning of the end of the parade, which always concludes with the SS, the Schutzstaffel. And here's Hitler's SS adjutant, whose name is Schaub. And we're going to have a whole group of people in the SS, first a band, and then the general SS will have the commander of Hitler's personal bodyguard. Here we have Heinrich Himmler, who's the head of the SS. He doesn't do the German parade step very well, but then he doesn't march in parades very often. We're going to see a little awkward movement here when they shake hands. One of them, this is Sepp Dietrich, the commander of Hitler's bodyguard. Now watch this scene with Himmler. They don't really know what to do with their hands, and so Hitler puts his back up to his mustache. And there's the mayor of Nuremberg, Willy Lai, there, the heavy-set guy who was sitting in the stands. Now we have the SS people marching by, and we're going to see very soon, there's Himmler, followed by the treasurer of the Nazi Party, who really died at age 72 in 1947, Franz Xavier Schwartz. But he, in an internment camp just before he was going to be put on trial, he financed all the party measures. Here he is, right here in the black cap. He was a general in the SS. Very responsible for a lot of things that were done that were quite evil. Here we have the Hitler SS troops. These are the regular SS troops, and they're going to be followed by the crowd pushing and shoving and waiting for the real fancy SS troops, and that's the small unit that was Hitler's personal bodyguard. Here's people hanging out of windows. There's a young boy in the Hitler Youth uniform and his mother and grandmother. And the regular SS units marching by. And then we're going to see the Army Chief of Staff that'll be shown waiting along with all these people in the crowd, pushing and shoving because they hear the SS band of his bodyguard. And here they are. This is the Leibstandarte to the bodyguard band of Adolf Hitler, all certain height. Watch the German parade step on the band leader. This is almost an impossible step to perform by any human being. He'd work well, I suppose, in a ballet. Here's Hitler's personal standard, the Führer standard, being carried by members of his bodyguard, who are all picked and chosen primarily for their height, I suppose not necessarily for their intelligence, although they're very loyal, committed Nazis. And only the best of the SS get to be in his bodyguard. And they'll come by with a parade step that'll be very fancy, and that will then conclude the parade. Here they are, and this is the famous German goose step or parade step. That's very hard on the leg muscles and also on the heels. There's General von Blomberg, Chief of Staff of the Army. Remember, we said he was fired 4 years later for marrying a lady of the evening and dismissed from service. There's the commander of Hitler's bodyguard and Sepp Dietrich. And here are the actual bodyguard regiment troops that stay nearby Hitler all the time, wherever he is. It's one regiment, about 3,000 people, and they're picked and chosen. This parade, then, which is coming by, will culminate in the best of their military formations. Once again, members of the party, But after a while, when Hitler's in power, the party is really merged with the state. So that by the time World War II starts, the SS is part of the state apparatus as well as part of the party apparatus. And here again, the concluding march of, in great precision, playing Hitler's favorite march, the Baden-Weiler March, which is a personal one of his. And then the scene will fade out to the Congress Hall for the concluding speech by Hitler of the entire week of party events. Here we have the National Eagle. It's called in German the Hoheitsadler, the National Eagle. And Hitler's marching in, followed by Rudolf Hess behind him, and Dr. Lai, and all the party chieftains, including Julius Streicher. And they're going to go into this Congress Hall, which holds several thousand people. Again, these are all party members. And Hitler's going to speak, after lots of welcoming, in very sober terms, in a way a little sad that the Sixth Party Congress is coming to an end, but that he's looking forward to the next ones. And Hitler generally starts his speeches in a very calm way and sort of works up into a fever with them as the crowd encourages him. It's an interesting oratorical style. There's Martin Bormann following him. Martin Bormann, incidentally, was never arrested. He was killed May 2nd in Berlin trying to escape the bunker. And every once in a while, American scandal magazines report him alive in Argentina, but his bones have been found, and DNA shows he's gone, and well-deserved end. Those are all the party leaders. Now we have the parade in of the party standards. Flags and banners are always very important in National Socialism. This is a rich panoply of color and paraphernalia. Sometimes one might argue less substance and more form, but somewhere in the parade of flags will always eventually be, in the place of honor, the blood flag, and you'll see it being carried in at this time too by the Standartenführer Jakob Grimminger, who seems to have had that as his only function until the war ended, and then he went back to being a city councilor. Here he is, Jakob Grimminger, and the blood flag has the place of honor, carried by the SS in black. Most of the other flags being carried by the SA, the brown-shirted people. And then they'll form up behind Hitler and in front of him. And you see this large Congress Hall. This is the same one that we started the party Congress in on September 4th, so now it's September 10th, and we're adding it. As you look at the standards coming in, you see the names. Those are districts where they came from. And recall that I said they all say Deutschland erwache on them, Germany awake. That was a rallying cry of the party in the early days. They're all topped with the German eagle and the hooked cross, the swastika, or the Hakenkreuz, which is the symbol of National Socialism. The national colors are red, white, and black. They were under Imperial Germany too, and then they were changed to red, gold, and black under the Weimar Republic, which is what they are today in Germany. But Hitler despised the Weimar Republic, so he did not permit the gold color to be used. And that was another call to tradition. He went back to the old colors of Imperial Germany, which were red, white, and black. So we have the stormtroopers now coming to attention. They've made their parade. Rudolf Hess is going to come up and simply say in German, Der Führer spricht, the Führer speaks. And now the crowd will anticipate the closing statement by their Führer of their party and the Chancellor of their nation and the overall ruler of Germany. And so we have Hitler waiting for the crowd to subside a little bit, looking over the crowd, and starting his speech in a very low tone, very businesslike, and it will build up gradually onto a heightened pitch when he will go into ecstatic moods, and you will see him, of course, do his gesticulations, and when you hear the sound portions of the disc, then you'll hear him very loudly proclaiming what he does, punctuating many sentences with strong language and exclamations. It's a typical style of Hitler's. That's why Hitler writings are not interesting to read, because Hitler writes the way he talks. Here's Rudolf Hess enthralled, Dr. Goebbels, Hermann Goering, knowing the camera's on him. This is his SA adjutant, this is Frick, the Minister of the Interior, Heinrich Himmler. There's the treasurer, Schwartz, next to Dr. Lai. They're all here, all the important people. And what you'll also see here, I forget when he'll show up, but I want to call your attention to him in case we miss him in quick passing, and that's the Reich Bishop Mueller. There is Ludwig Mueller, the Reich Bishop, the evangelical Protestant bishop, who died at age 63 of suicide in Berlin in 1946 because he really tried to blend National Socialism with Christianity. And he was offensive to the decent Christian pastors, both Catholic and Protestant and the lay people throughout the entire Reich. We'll see him in a minute. You won't be able to miss him because he looks like a bishop. He's wearing a clerical robe.
Wir mussten als Partei in der Minorität bleiben, weil wir die wertvollsten Elemente des Kampfes und des Opfersinns in der Nation mobilisierten.
Now, there's something that ought to be said about the Hitler stare, the way he looks at people. Hitler was extremely nearsighted. How do we know that? Well, his personal valet, Heinz Linge, said that he had to read from speeches on the Führer typewriter, which had 2.5-inch type. He couldn't see, but he didn't think that a leader should wear glasses. And here's Julius Streicher, the pornographer, agreeing to something in the speech. So Hitler couldn't see, so he's very nearsighted, but he used that to his advantage. Look at him wave his arms and raise his voice in a great pitch. He's fond of repeating certain words like Germany, Deutschland, like blood, Blut, like Reich, which is sort of the untranslatable word for empire, Deutsches Reich, German Empire. And he loves the word Volk, Volk, Volksgemeinschaft, people community. Of course, that's where we get the word Volkswagen, people's car, which incidentally Hitler designed. It wasn't just Dr. Porsche. Hitler did the original drawings for the car. And it was originally had a longer, more cumbersome name, the Strength Through Joy car. But that didn't sound like it would sell, so they changed it from KDF Wagen to Volkswagen. But he's got flowers on the podium, and he's making his important points. And what is he saying? Well, he's talking about the leadership. He's talking to the leadership. He's saying that the best Germans are always National Socialists, but only the best National Socialists will be, as he puts it. Here's the bishop, Reich Bishop Mueller. There he is. A disgrace to Christianity, and if he hadn't committed suicide after the war, he probably would have been put on trial. But Hitler's saying all good Germans will be National Socialists, but only the best National Socialists will be Volksgenossen, that is to say, people comrade, members of the party. And he says it's not enough just to think National Socialism. He's screaming that out here. He's saying, you must swear to fight. Ich kämpfe, he says in German. I fight. It's not enough to say I swear, I fight. And that's what this party is all about. For all time to come, the political leadership of the state will come from the party. And the party is the core of our political state. Its doctrine is unchanging. It's as tough as steel. But when we have to be flexible, we will. And we're going to treat it, he says, almost like a holy order. Almost like something that's sacred. And that's when he concludes with the remark, doesn't conclude, but ends this part of the speech with the remark that really all good Germans should be National Socialists, he's saying now, but the best National Socialists are party comrades. And then the crowd and he break out into the German salute, yelling out, "Hail victory, hail victory, hail victory" in German. Of course, the wording is Sieg Heil, which means hail victory. And then he goes on after sort of timed waiting while the people cheer him, and he has political handlers, no doubt. Then he goes on to say that it wasn't easy in the beginning to be National Socialists, and the enemies of the party hurt the party. But now, when the party's strong, the party itself should purge itself of what's bad. And here he's making a reference to the purge that he's just conducted of Ernst Röhm and as he sees it, the traitorous leaders of the SA. And all the people that are left alive, and are presumably glad to be left alive, are clapping and saying, yeah, we got to get rid of the ones that are traitors. So he makes a very emphatic statement throughout this entire speech, and waves his hands around and talks about a state that will last 1,000 years. 1,000-year Reich is what he's talking about. And that's what he's preaching. Of course, the real Reich only lasts 12 years, but he's looking ahead to 1,000-year Reich. And when the old people in the party fall, the new ones will come along and take their places. This is an ideological movement that this man is setting up. It isn't just to hold power, it's to win a whole population over to the National Socialist ideology. He's been talking throughout these 4, 5, 6 days about the party a lot, but he's a political animal. Hitler is very much a political animal, and he knows that the army, and when I say the army, I mean the whole armed forces, but in that period in Germany, the army dominated the armed forces. The army has to be brought into the bargain, and he needs to praise that army because he wants that army to be the strength of the state, and the army is one of those traditional pillars of the state that everyone worships. So here he's praising them, the wonderful army, and he shows General von Blomberg, the camera pans to him, and then all to the other chiefs of staff. The army, with its traditions, will join the party, and together, the two of them will not only protect the German people, but they'll educate the German people, and they'll carry the German people on their shoulders to make a greater German state, a greater German empire. Now he just sort of fades into the concluding paragraph saying that, well, this is the end of the party week of activities, and while I'm speaking to you here, some of our people have already made plans and gone, and they're making plans for the next meeting, and this has been an inspiring week that we've met, and this political movement that we've set up is eternal. It's set up our people for a political philosophy forever. And he concludes with dramatically, long live National Socialist movement, long live Germany. And then to a sea of cheers, Heil, 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 hail, he leaves the podium, returns to his seat, and we have this long view of the whole Congress Hall with the swastika flag at the end, Hermann Goering nodding in agreement, and you can see the blood banner carrier in the back, people getting up to cheer him. Rudolf Hess now with a smile on his face gets up, and what Rudolf Hess does is acknowledge Hitler. He lets the people say a few things, and then Hess says the party is Hitler, but Hitler is Germany, and Germany is also Hitler, and he just repeats that over and over, and as a result then allowing for the people to make their clapping when they want to. He brings the meeting to an end with this statement, which I've just said, about the party being Hitler. And after that statement, which Hess yells out to the cheering crowd, it's followed by Hail Victory again, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. And then the entire assembled crowd, following the cheers that they've just given, sing out the Nazi party anthem, the Horst Wessel song, which is called Raise the Banner. Horst Wessel was the young Nazi Party pimp, really. He was a pimp who was killed in a brawl in 1930 at the age of 23. But the one thing that he did do was write this national anthem, which the party loves to sing. And the words go something like this: raise the banner, the columns are closed tightly, and while I'm reciting it to you, they're singing it in the Congress Hall. The SA marches with a peaceful, strong step. Comrades shot by the Red Front and the reactionaries march in spirit together in our columns. Free the streets for the brown battalions. Free the streets for the SA men. The swastika is full of hope for millions. The day for freedom and bread has dawned. In the end, Hitler's dream turned into a nightmare for himself and for the German people and for the whole